and welcome to TTELT, Teaching Tips for English Language Teachers, a program of educators worldwide. I'm your host today, Melanie Gobert. I'd like to introduce you to our guest on tonight's TTLT podcast, Phil Cowlishaw. Phil is currently teaching at the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company Technical Academy, where he teaches vocational students. The title of his talk is The Meditative Approach. Pay attention, listen, and offer variety. What exactly do you mean by the meditative approach, Phil?
Well, first of all, thank you, Melanie, for having me here today. I have a little disclaimer just to say that I haven't actually been teaching for a while because I've been doing more LMS work lately where I work, but I have been teaching about 8 or 9 years. And what do I mean by it? I'll try not to talk too much about myself, but I feel like everything I do is connected to where I started. And what do I mean by that? At 19, I did start to get involved into yoga and meditation, Tai Chi. I started acting, I started singing. I studied communications in college, radio and TV, even some improv comedy, and then I studied opera in graduate school. So those were I talk about these 5 to 7 years in my early 20s that were very pivotal and affected me a lot. And so the things I learned then, I continue to carry into whatever I do presently. So when you asked, what should I talk about or what would I like to talk about? I thought of sort of generic things, and I took some notes on those things, some general items. But really, the thing that's most important to my heart is relationships and making connections, and obviously being mindful and being aware of what it is that I'm doing and trying to do it the best way possible. So the meditative approach is really, it's like 24/7 for me. I get up at 4 o'clock every morning. I go walking, I do yoga, I do a little bit of meditation and chanting. And then I take that mindfulness, hopefully, ideally, into the rest of my day, into my relationships, into my teaching, into whatever it is that I'm doing. And for me, a word that's very important to me is balance. So I'm trying to always sort of be aware of what's happening inside of me, my thoughts, my feelings, my actions, my internal, could be sensations, or what I like to call the movie that's usually going on in most of our minds, as well as being aware of my students and what's happening outside of my body. So I'm always sort of trying to balance that. And when I am teaching, actually, you invited me a couple of days ago, and then I was asked to sub for a colleague of mine. So I was able to teach for 2 periods, which was nice. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is what it feels like, because it had been a long time because of COVID and everything. I hadn't been in a classroom in a long time. So I don't know, I assume every teacher has this sort of an experience to some degree, but as soon as I get into the classroom, I feel an energy. I feel a connection right away to the students, or I don't. Sometimes I can feel not connected to them. And so I'm always trying to find out what's the obstacle between me and the students, because to me, of course, people can learn in a very generic, just sort of, spit out the information and people write down the notes or not. And there's some learning that takes place, but I find that for myself, I want it to be much more interactive, much more exciting, mostly because I want to enjoy what I'm doing all the time. But I really think that the students enjoy it more if you do it that way. So for example, the other day when I was subbing, we were going over prepositions of time, not the most exciting thing. The main 3 we were looking at were in, on, and at. There were some others that we looked at as well. And so I'll take sort of, improv comedy is going too far, but I take that sort of creativity that I like to bring into each area of my life, and I try to infuse it into the students as well. And so one of the, see if I can remember, one of the sentences was something like, oh, he was supposed to meet her at 8:30. Well, it's just that one line, but I take it more forward and I say, okay, let's create a story here. Why? Why do you think he wasn't able to meet her at 8:30? What's the story? And it's fun. The students sort of don't expect it. And oh, okay. So they start thinking, start being a little bit more creative. And they come up with some interesting options sometimes. I'm very big. I wanted to be a news reporter for the longest time, actually, too. So I love the W questions. I'm always like, all right, pretend you're somewhere and you're asking what, where, who, when, why, all these things. And I feel, obviously, again, grammar is important. But because of my background, again, I didn't really formally study education, or my father was a teacher, but I didn't study that. So I really came to it just with a curiosity, I would say. And so I think these questions, instead of looking at just the grammar itself, I just ask a lot of questions. Well, who do you think this was? What was he doing? Why was he doing it? Where do you think he was when he did it, or something? And yeah, and so I try to basically stimulate analytical or critical thinking within them, because I want them, I only have so much time with my students, and I want to help them to also be mindful, also to be aware, also to analyze text, also to be a little creative. And because I think it helps them to actually to learn the grammar points or the vocab, whatever it might be, that there's something, I remember hearing at some point that, if you think about your memories, why do you remember some things and not other things? It's usually because there's some sort of an emotional component there. Either it's a very negative or very positive event, and that's why you remember it. So if I can, I try to instill some sort of an emotion in any of the grammar or the lessons that I'm teaching. I was at a language center before this, and sometimes, not every day, but sometimes I would get there maybe at 9 a.m. and leave at 9 p.m. And I had a lot of classes to teach. And luckily where I taught, they were big on the communicative approach. So I had to always just keep pushing myself to keep talking, keep communicating, keep listening to the students. And keep bringing it back to them, so that my teacher talk time was low and that it was really just about them. Most people do like to talk about themselves. We're all very busy these days. So, people, in fact, it's kind of amazing sometimes, maybe you've had this experience too, in private lessons, people sometimes open up to you and even start sharing things with you. So I always felt really honored to be in that position and to help them really achieve their goals. I think I'm rambling a bit now, so I'm going to stop.
How you pay attention as a teacher to the students. And you've also talked a little bit about what you mean by listening to the students.
Yeah.
So one more question for you. What are the different ways that you offer variety to the students?
Well, again, at the language center where I was before, it was very, the materials were very minimal. They were fine, but something that, sort of the, what is it, the silver lining that happened with COVID is that we started teaching from home. We started using online platforms. And this is when I think something sort of woke up inside of me. And I got really excited about all the things that, you can find online. Started using ClassKick and Nearpod and quizzes and videos. And I started creating with Google Docs, some different sort of escape rooms and things like that. More videos, more stories, again, more drama, trying to make it a little bit more interesting, especially with the lower level English. Our students are around B1. That's the intention, is that they'll pass the PET test. But yeah, so again, not just presenting plain grammar, plain vocab. In fact, I just started seeing a show last night called I think The Last of Us on HBO. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And I was watching it, and it starts off in an English class. And of course, the teacher's like, blah, 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 do this. What is this? And they always show an English class, and the students are so bored. And I thought, gosh, I don't ever want to teach a class like that. I had a very nice English teacher in ninth grade that really helped me to get into creative writing and whatnot. But anyway, so in terms of variety, obviously there are the 8 multiple intelligences. We have students that learn in different ways. So I think if the whole environment of the classroom is really conducive for learning, there's a lot of stimulation. I also taught at Montessori for a while, and that's all about sensory stimulation. So really having an alive classroom, being alive myself, feeling like I've slept well and taken care of myself, so that I'm very present to model the language, present it, but then of course to listen to them. And to really listen to them, a little bit of intuition maybe even in there, not just to their words, but also their body language, their facial expressions. And sometimes that's kind of where the magic can happen.
Let me ask you one follow-up question.
Yes.
Just about come to an end. What do you think is the key to motivating unmotivated students?
Whoa, I tell you, I've been chewing on that one for a while. Obviously, you know, there are intrinsic and extrinsic motivations for students. Some people really want to learn English or anything for that matter. And so they're hungry. It's great when you get a student who's hungry to learn and motivated. Some people are sent there because of work or whatnot. And it's a little bit more difficult. I think the only thing, again, is to just try to bring it back to the people, the students. Try to find something that's interesting and relevant to them. Because again, if you know, with my students, again, I'll pretty much talk about anything. I'm very open. You know, I have to be careful sometimes because I'll talk about anything. But yeah, if you make them aware that it's not just about some, you know, grammar point in a book, but that it's about communication and it's about them really growing and expanding and opening their mind to, you know, there's a whole vast world, then they can start to get a little bit more excited. And they feel like, oh, okay, I actually have a place here. And it's about me too. It's, you know, the teacher's authentically interested in me. He's not just trying to get a paycheck or just, you know, check off a box or get his job done. He's actually interested in me. And then sometimes you'll see a little bit more light in their eyes and a little bit more. Yeah.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you so much, Phil, for joining us. And I'd like to thank you so much for sharing your valuable time with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Share with us how you are using these tips. Leave us a comment or voice message on social media or at ttelt.org. Thanks for joining this episode of TTELT, brought to you by Educators Worldwide. Follow, like, and subscribe to TTELT on your social media, and try a new teaching tip today.